Hello and welcome to my final installment of my Monster Maps 2022 versions. Okay, so this is a piece of semi-gloss cardstock that is 10 by 16 inches, fairly large, and what we're going to do is we're going to create several zones here featuring different scenes and see if we can combine them together in a seamless fashion. Kind of disregarding traditional kind of a Western sensibilities on perspective and kind of treating it more like a game board or like an amusement park, kind of three-quarter view map. All right, so I'm establishing this area here that's going to be the entry point. The previous two versions of my monster maps this year have been a left side and then a center entry point. So on this one, I'm making a right side entry point. So if the pieces were to be viewed together, you'd have a left, center, and right entry point for these maps. Okay, so one of the things about this is I want to create kind of this trail going around in a fairly strong visual path kind of way. All right, and this is going to be a cave type of situation, so I'm making a cave roof here and kind of establishing that. There's a lot of things that I don't know where they're going to go when I'm doing this. Even when I'm working here, I don't have a lot of it figured out. I'm just kind of winging it in some ways. I'm placing these larger types of elements down first, or fairly strong visual anchor points, you might say. So there's that Egyptian area, the rock walls on the lower right, and I had that kind of a, I don't know if you can tell what that is, but it's a little bit of like ancient ruins with like a little skeleton on the lower left. All right, I'm going to make a little kind of underground pool in that upper right area. Now, what I'm doing here, the thing about these maps is trying to figure out the transition zones between the different scenes, you might call it, different rides or something if it's an amusement park. So here I am just trying to use the rocks in this case as the visual kind of link and also boundaries within the piece. All right, this is the tiny rocks, and what I'm doing now is I'm anchoring down my different objects with a little bit of textural shading. Usually you can do, I don't know, some tone with some ink or colored pencils or whatever you're doing, but what I've been doing lately is I've been using a lot of textures to create kind of a shading effect, so that I not only get the shade added down, but it's done in a very textural way. So these are some tiny rocks, and I'm doing repeated impressions of them at the base of objects, and like I said, it anchors them down and creates some different shadows. And when you anchor them down that way, it gives the objects kind of a sense that they're sitting in the scene more than they would feel like without this type of shadow. You know, any type of lighting in any type of situation is going to kind of create some sort of shadow within the area. All right, that's my little Edward Gorey stamp there going in that water. So it kind of creates a little bit of a pool there like that. Adding in some snails. I've been wanting to add in some snails into my previous two scenes, but I just didn't have the opportunity for them, so a lot of things are just getting thrown in here. All right, this is a piece that during the live stream I said, after I did it, I thought, it looks like a little information booth, you know, with some character in there, a little, you know, I don't know, whatever he is, like a fire demon or something like that, or troll or something like that, so I added him in there. I kind of wiped off some of the top of his head, you know, because I want him to look like he's kind of coming out of the light or something like that. But then I later thought maybe he should be coming out of the darkness. All right, so in my previous scene, it was mostly the grasses that were doing all of the connections within the different zones. But in this underground area, it's all rock, so using a lot of the boulders with lichen small. Oh, I should have used the boulders with lichen large in here too, because I used that Well, it is up there. It's the cave roof, I guess, but I don't know. I guess the boulders like and small will do the kind of creating the continuity between the first, second, and third scene. Okay, so that's my end point for my game. It's a little pyramidal shape. I still didn't know exactly what I was going to put up there. I had all kinds of different ideas, but I do have these running kids. See, I position them right there. And we're gonna start this second live stream off, stamping these little kids running to that location there, and adding in some more of the boulders with lichen there, just using a small portion, kind of creating a more kind of defined cave entrance for those people to walk into. And here's my eyeball that I was wanting to use on the first scene, but I ended up using a much smaller eyeball that was less kind of a focal point. But this creates a really strong exit point with that eyeball there. I was going to put a sun up there, but it just wasn't strong enough for so many things that are going on in this map. I'm doing something that's I don't always do, or I really never do in my scenes, which is kind of creating this clutter in here. And as I do this, I'm getting a little bit more bold because I'm going against my kind of the sensibilities that I have for smaller cards, traditional, quarter page cards or something like this. But on this one right here, you really want a lot going on. It just makes it a lot more interesting. And I don't know, it's kind of a map, but it's also kind of it's almost like a hidden object type of game going on in here. Right here, I'm adding some foreground, adding in a little skeleton down there in our little skeleton party. There's a dancing skeleton, one line down. Adding in a little bit of that anchoring texture and tone down there with that tiny rock stamp. Adding some birds flying in the distance there to go kind of around those bats. I added that hand in there. It looks like it's reaching down towards that little figure, that stone relic or whatever. Looks like a little kid where someone's reaching down to grab it or kind of run their finger, petting a little kid's hair or something like that as they're sleeping. All right, stamping a tree upside down. That's supposed to represent like roots coming into the cave from, the surface or something like that. Everything right now, it should be pointed out, is really cluttered looking, okay? That's what you want, in my opinion, on these types of scenes. It makes the end result more interesting. And it's kind of fun and playful doing it this way. It's almost like, it's stamping. You kind of have to, here's a little slug here. You have to stamp with kind of, I don't know, what's the saying? With abandon, you just kind of throw some ideas, sensibilities out the window in terms of style and taste, I guess you can say. I don't know, maybe not that, but you really just want to clutter. You're kind of doing like a scene like, if you gave a little kid 100 different stamps and you had a piece of paper and you said, okay, go to town on this or whatever, stamp me something. It wouldn't have a lot of open space in there. They would stamp all kinds of little things in there everywhere. Okay, adding in some shadows and tone in here. Okay, now this is where shadows and light kind of subdue certain things and it brings other things together, makes things stand out, it makes things kind of get pushed back in the distance. Okay, so that's why going with a lot of different clutter is fine, if not better in this type of situation. Okay, now one of the things I mentioned, I really tried to point out in the live stream is you really want to kind of oscillate your lights and darks in here. It makes for a more kind of varied surface and therefore a rich surface when you vary your tones. So you see a lot of this dark light, kind of checkerboarding type of touch that I'm adding in here. Usually at the base of things, I'm adding a little bit of shadow, just like I was doing with that texture, okay? So at the base of the rocks or the base of the forms of the rocks, okay? There's a lot of forms within the rocks. I'm adding those shadows in there, but you can see where there's lights and darks in all of these different areas. I'm not just taking a large rock stamp and coloring it in uniformly. There's parts of it that are light, parts of it that are dark. See that waterfall there in the corner? The water area is light, and the rock area is dark to make that water stand out. Okay, see this little snail shell right here, shading some of it, but not shading other parts of it to vary it so there's lights and darks within the objects, okay? And that's what I'd always recommend for you. Even in areas like the flooring in there, there's lights and shadow within the floor. On each, say, skull or face, there's lights and darks within those faces right here. And it doesn't have to be a mystery of where to add those lights and darks, the shading, or the additional shading, I would say. If a design is darker in a certain area, then add more dark to that area. And if a design is lighter in a certain area, leave those areas a little bit lighter. It doesn't mean you have to leave them white, but leave them lighter than the darker areas. So reinforce the shadows that are designed in the designs, if it has it. Some designs are outlines, okay? But like even in this eyeball right here, see I'm shading the shaded areas of that eye, okay? And leaving the other areas a little bit lighter. And that makes things a little bit easier in terms of your tone placement. This is grayscale, but you also do that with colors. Okay, putting some finishing touches on this monster map number 3. Alright, I'm just stamping out this winter twigs upside down, kind of to represent, I don't know, roots or something like that growing on the cave floor. I don't know, we just needed a little bit of extra texture, and that's what the tiny rocks, the larger version of it, in a darker color is providing here as well. Alright, now I wanted to break up the exit for this cave a little bit by adding some leaves in there to kind of represent something going from the cave to the outside area, and repeating that on the entranceway. I'm stamping some leaves around this entrance to represent, you know, that same type of, you know, foliage heading into that type of system there. Alright, so on the tops of these urns, something that I was really looking forward to doing, and that's making these glowing orbs, okay? Some kind of fire coming out of those would be better, but you know, that would be hard to do without some sort of flame stamp, or I could have made like a template, I guess, or something like that, but glowing orbs would be better. Okay, so doing some highlighting with this 0.7mm acrylic paint pen. I'm not going to show too much of that because it's kind of hard to see the details in this type of video format. So, but these are the types of things that give a really strong sense of lighting direction and details into the various little objects and areas. Alright, adding some highlights on these columns, and see that little slug up on top of that structure there, these ruins. Adding a little bit of highlighting to that. It makes the objects seem a little bit more three-dimensional on the rib cage of this skeleton. Okay, some bleed-proof white. A really fun technique is splatter painting, something that we might remember from, I don't know, kindergarten or something like that. Using the bleed-proof white, a very opaque watercolor paint. Okay, and adding some extra splashes at the base of that underground waterfall, and then splashing some of those textures up there in the upper area just to give it a little bit of extra kind of contrast and, again, lighting. Okay, so the white pigment ink is really going to expand on the textural range of this entire piece. Okay, adding in that white gives a translucent type of look to any areas that it's been applied, especially if you do it in kind of a dry brushing type of format. You want to think about it like you're applying like a powder onto the scene or something of that sort. So that being said, you really want to have a very dry application of it on your cotton ball. Okay, don't have too much ink on there. Everyone applies too much ink at first and they think, oh my god, that looks horrible. Okay, but I can't reiterate enough, you have to remove a lot of the ink. That being said, we're doing the same thing with this cotton swab and a very light application of that white pigment ink to make those orbs kind of glow, to give it that extra little textural touch, and it really makes those kind of orbs really fun to do. You can do this on stars up in the sky too, or something of that sort, and it's really a great look. Okay, adding a three-dimensional element with some light beams. I have the vanishing point being the center of that eye. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, no pun intended, but just laying those two pieces of paper down like that to create a little bit of a light beam template, and then adding the light beam in there. Vary your light beam from kind of, you know, a thicker application to a little bit of thinner one, maybe a little bit more ink towards the eye, the source of light, I guess, where it's emanating from, and then kind of taper it as it moves away from that eye for a little bit of variation. And there you have it. There's your monster map number 3. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.